Yeah.
Let's see here. Kind of going over my notes.
No, take your time. It's no problem.
Can you briefly touch on dominator culture? That whole that part, and just because I think it kind of you come at it from so many angles of how this has been worked into what we got going on, and that really resonated. You talked about the difference between, what was it, partnership culture?
Partnership cultures and dominator cultures, and this all goes back to after the Younger Dryas cataclysm, around according to the ice cores that they pulled out of Antarctica, around 11,500 years ago, an asteroid hit the top part of the globe and instantly melted 7-mile thick sheets of ice, and the water from that outpoured all over the northern continent, so all over Russia, and then down into China, and then all into North America and on into South America. It's one of the reasons why America has been a breadbasket, was because all that rich forest that had been developing in the north all immediately was crushed and brought down and covered the United States. Okay, well, this wiped out everything basically bigger than a chicken. And so there were very few human beings that made it past this event because it was so cataclysmic. And so it really went back to the bottom 3 chakra, because really you had to fight for existence. There was no housing, you weren't protected. And so life was basically horrific for these people, because they're trying to make a world out of a world that's been destroyed. Okay, well, go a few thousand years past that, get through agriculture, get through the development of cities, the development of urban, we start getting into the early cultures that are coming out of this cataclysm. And so you then naturally, squirrel monkeys have a hierarchy. So there's a natural hierarchy that comes out of human beings, even these conscious beings, that comes out of them. And so if that's not correctly steered, there's going to be really bad psychology that comes out of survival of the fittest, because then you're going to start, killing your neighbors to survive. And this kind of attitude, this kind of approach to life, that life is something that you have to overcome, that society is something you have to control, and we're going to beat that society, because if we don't beat that society, they're going to come and kill us. And so it is a survival instinct that is fostering the spiritual inclinations of these people. And that's why you have the Hebrews and Israelites that have totally gone into all these different types of weird spiritual ritualistic killing of animals, killing of people, and all this kind of stuff is coming out, because they're coming out of this barbaric society. They're coming out of an age of people where they're literally fighting everything to survive. I mean, even the weather is wanting to kill you. So it's a very barbaric age. And from that, well, that's where Babylonia, that comes into play, the Syro-Arabians, and that all comes into play. And these empires that are barbaric, marauding, desert-dwelling empires that, man, these people will, like it says in Numbers 31, they'll take all the kids, rape all the women, and then keep the kids as slaves and kill all the men. I mean, this is the societies that are forming the baseline of Christianity. Because to this day, the Old Testament is still there. I mean, the Old Testament, that goes back to 1,500 BC. And those values that were created by these dominating, fighting, barbaric cultures have permeated all the way down to today. And this was the model. This was the spiritual model that was handed to society at that time. And so this is why you get something like the Catholic Church that comes out and starts making these barbaric claims on people, but that, like, if you don't believe and do as we tell you, you're going to go to hell and burn forever and you'll never know God. That kind of idea comes out of a barbaric society. This is what formed our dominator culture now. This is why it is a greed-based system. This is why it's a system based on power and usurpation. We never left the bottom 3 chakra. The entire society is still running on that chakra, on the bottom 3. The entire medical industry is run on fear. The entire spiritual industry is run on fear. The entire governmental industry is run on fear. Fear, fear, fear. Folks, this goes back thousands of years. We have been trained and indoctrinated. We're so thick in that, it's almost impossible, like I said, to exfoliate that skin. And so that's why we're having right now these massive disruptions that are going on. It's the only way people are going to wake up. And there's going to be massive casualties, just like there were at the last stage. And that just is part and parcel of the development of consciousness, the development of human beings. We can't run from this. We have to accept this as cataclysm is a part of nature. That's a part of us. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This must be accepted. And we simply have to use our assets, namely our higher consciousness, to see past the pain and suffering that we're in so that we can transcend it. Yeah. And so the dominator culture thing, we have to get over that. We have to move into partnership cultures. We have to move into the idea of affecting our local area, affecting those around us, being friends of the people that are here near us, relating to them. I work at a grocery store some of the time during the week, and I love it. I get to meet all the public. I live in this little tiny town called Maple Falls, and I get to meet all the people. I know all the locals by first name. I interact with them. I know their kids. I know their pets, and it's awesome. And I have a positive influence into the society because we're a very blue state. And so these people are very controlled. They do as they told. In other words, they get the vaccines. They do as the medical institutions and establishments tell them. And so being a light in that presence is my role. And so I'm not going around browbeating people saying, no, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. I'm just trying to show them the light within me, being an exemplar in the environment so that they notice that, you know what, you don't have a ton of anxiety about the C19 thing, man. What's the deal? Why aren't you concerned about that? And then I can address the question because I'm friends with them, because I've been talking with them for the last year working at the shop. And so that is what we need to do as a partnership society. We need to integrate into the local culture. We need to have effect on the local people. And that's partnership idea. That's the partnership idea. And so that's why I emphasize that in the book, because it's important to take that into consideration as to how you're going to influence the world.
Absolutely. And that you actually, in a lot of ways, answered a question I had for you, because I was wanting to bring up in this age of information after this extreme dominant, like we've only known this dominance culture our whole life. So in this age of information, add in the fact that we have the internet and we're all of a sudden aware of everything in the world. And on one hand, being aware of the things that are going on is extremely important to have perspective. But on the other hand, we're not built to hold this level of heaviness. We're all carrying the weight of the burdens of everything. And so I was going to ask you, like, how do you find that balance, that integration? And that seems to make sense because on one hand, I agree, getting the word out, using this technology, using these things for good is also very important. We have to combat it in that space. But also, I think that helped me a lot to just think about, but if you're not integrating with your environment, whether it be your home, your nature around you, your neighbors, all of that, if you're not integrating in that way and you're only in this like big world perspective, that's when it could probably go off the rails. Because I've seen a lot of people who woke up in 2020, myself included, turn into a place of anxiety and fear. And then I had this realization about a month ago, coming out of this political cult a bit. I had a realization that I've been looking down on people almost like a religious person for the last couple of years who got the shot or who did this. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, you're living in fear. And then I had this realization that I've been living in fear that everyone's going to die. And some of them, I was like watching them just live their lives. Yeah, they wore a mask or they did the thing, but they're just going to their sports games with their kids and living their lives. And I'm like, how can you do that at a time like this? And I'm like, I have something to learn from them as well. They're involved where I separated myself from the world, my friends, for the truth, and anyway.
Well, I think a way to avoid that kind of anxiety is simply realizing that we are not in a plan. Okay. When we were born, there wasn't a set path and way and plan for us. Okay. We are born authentic and spontaneous, and we really make the life that we experience. It's not a set like fate. Your fate is not set when you're born. You determine this through your decisions and your actions and your thoughts. And so when you see a world so chaotic like today, you have to realize that in the same way that I am on a rough journey called life, so also is nature and the environment, the planet, the universe. Everything is on, because it contains both good and evil. It's going to have rough times, it's going to have positive times. And so therefore, you don't hold to say, well, this religion says this is going to happen at this time. And so that creates anxiety because you're expecting that. Yeah. Or this kind of this person says this is going to happen at this time, or this doctor says that half the world is going to be dead in 2 years. It's like, okay, I understand, but all of these things are simply scenarios that are unfolding. We don't know. We don't know where things are going any more than we know our own path. We really discover it as we go. And so by living like that, you have much less anxiety because you're not living by expectation. You're not living thinking, why is my plan like this? Why am I on a plan that's so painful? I don't want this plan. Rather, you're just accepting, like, well, there's painful parts of life. There are rough things that we have to see. There are rough choices that people make that we have to experience that are really painful and really hurtful. And that really has to be taken simply as that's just part of growth. You can't have growth and have comfort at the same time. These two things don't get along. And so you have to understand there's going to be some uncomfortability sometimes, in the same way that there's going to be comfortability sometimes, but not run or attach to either. You don't run to or run from the evil or the good. You simply accept them. You're the center of the wheel. You simply accept them, and you observe and you see these things, and it's tough to see and you have to work through that. But the bigger your philosophy, the more you'll be able to see these events happen and realize this is just part of the unfolding of the enigma that is life, that is the universe, that is us, that is myself. And that enigma, it's not going to unfold in a square way. It's not going to unfold in a nice house. It's going to have to be put together through our experience. And little by little, you can build some kind of structure to understand yourself, at least, and what is happening around you a little bit better. And that simply is not hanging to anything, no clean. Like I said earlier, be a ball in a stream. Thought to thought to thought, experience. Don't let any of these things hang you up. Don't let any pain hold you. Don't let any goodness hold you. Simply accept them as, like, this is just part of life. It's just the way it is. And that's beautiful. The beauty is experiencing the dynamisms. That's the beauty. And so, like the ball in the stream, it's not resisting. It's just rolling down. It's just doing its thing, just like the child. That's the approach. And then there's no anxiety. You just simply laugh. And you just simply accept these things. This is the dance. Some of it is really funky and weird, and some of it's great, and some it's like, I never want to see that again. It's pure cringe. So it's just, that's life. That's the way it is.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to put it, because there's always a sense of, like, do I just completely let go into the flow of, like, I can't control anything? So then you almost go into, I don't know if it'd be nihilism, but almost like nothing matters. That's not the answer either, you know. But then on the other hand, it's this idea, like you said, of getting out of the structure and the plan and realizing there's no fixed point in time. There's no outcome that is, it's really up to us what it is. And it's a huge thing to get your mind out of, like, a path or a plan or just taking your hand off the wheel and saying, I don't care about anything. It's hard to get yourself to understand, to participate in the experience, and that you will change the world around you based on how you participate with it. And it's a totally different, I don't think, it just feels very foreign, because like you said, the structures that we're used to building in our minds give us either an idea that's projected into the future, which isn't real, that's stuck in the past, which isn't real, or it's through this construct of this book or this religion or whatever. And it's like, when you're just standing in that open field, it's like, what do I want to do? And I guess it just changed the way, and I don't have any answers. It just has been changing the way I'm looking at everything. And all I can come up with is whatever I feel needs to come out, I follow that. And I'm noticing that I'm getting that, my senses back, almost like the things that I'm drawn to speak about, the things that I'm drawn towards, you know?
Yeah. And that's a big thing with Joseph Campbell. Follow your bliss, follow your heart. When you're in that field, no, it's following your heart. You're in the field, meaning you're free. And so your heart is able to speak. The heart speaks to a free space. And so you're able to, when you're free of anxiety, you're free of the, gripping to life, the heart is so much more able to easily communicate with you and effectively communicate with you. And that really is essential for peace. That really is essential for having a life that you really love. Because he always said, you pursue your bliss, you pursue the things you love, you go after those things without any apology. That's why he said, when you're falling, dive, like, go for it, follow your heart. And the heart's path is not going to be easy. It's going to be major challenging. It's going to be full of love, but it's not going to be a primrose path. It's going to be rough, man, because there's no path. And you're having to, you're making your path as you go. And so there's no set way. There's no one to follow. There are, I think of it sort of like in a city, you have all these different skyscrapers, and they're filled with all different technologies and all different businesses. And you can go in them and find out all kinds of stuff in all these different towers, and you can learn a lot about life and a lot about the goings on of everything. And this makes you a larger person, but you always leave the building and come back to the field to contemplate. And so you can take these technologies, you can take the development of society, absolutely, integrate that, absolutely. Yeah, bring that stuff in that resonates with you, but don't get tied into anything. Don't get locked into any one building, because then you're only going to be able to see out where that building sees. And it's the same thing, like you said, with Christianity. You're in a structure. And if the only structure you can see is a Christian world and a savior to come save it, you're never going to see any other world. And you will be lost in that. You won't develop. And my whole argument with the Great Awakening is the whole point is consciousness expansion. How do I expand my consciousness? Living in one spirituality, living in one medical system, living in one governmental system. Like, I will do much better if I simply resonate with the portions that resonate with me, and then I can be an influence to my local community through that heartfelt action that I feel through the exposure to these institutions. And so I think it's a really big question, but there are definitely ways to integrate, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost like we're in this big process of unlearning all of the bullshit that we were taught. And I see it. I see, like, obviously something major happened in 2020, and I'm not just going to say the government got all crazy. They were always crazy. I think the veil was lifted. Yeah, they pushed things a little too far. There was some wrenches in their works, but either way, there was a much deeper, bigger expansion happening. And as that's happening, I'm noticing that we were all, like you talk about, coming out of a coma or being asleep and waking up. I think that there was such a shock, and we all kind of like found, it was almost like there was another layer waiting for us. Like, oh, they're awake. Here you go. Here's this person. Here's that person. And then we went into our pockets of our little saviors. At least that's what I did. And I see a lot of people do, like, oh, well, now I'm going to join this religion, whether it be the Republicans, or whatever, which I'm not saying anything bad about, but that's what I did. I was like, I'm a Republican now, and this and that. And it's like, I was developing this new structure and identity. And one thing I've noticed in the last, I think that something is bigger shifting right now, because the dust has settled for humanity. And we've gotten a little better at dealing with this madness. We're 3 years in. People just get tired of all of the emotions. Like, we're at a point where we're starting to observe, I'm noticing, and people are popping through almost like another layer. Do you see that at all? Like, from when you first did your awakening video to now, like, where do you see us in the process, just from your perspective?
As far as the world is concerned?
Yeah, as far as all, like, overall.
I think we are at or just past rock bottom, or just entering rock bottom as a society. I think we're really at the culmination of the Kali Yuga, like I mentioned earlier, that Hinduistic idea that the world crumbles eventually and then it rebuilds itself. And so this is really a test for the people who are ready for the larger consciousness, because having a larger consciousness is it's not easy. It's not easy because you become aware of things that maybe you didn't want so much to become aware of, but they open your world up. And so we are at a place right now where those kind of things, I think, are beginning to open. And I think people are going to realize just how far this dominator culture took things. And I think people are going to find out some real horrific things. I mean, most in the community I live, I mean, I am an extremist in my views. I mean, I'm crazy in my views. So most people don't realize what's coming, and they don't realize the severity of it. I don't think they realize the seriousness of it. But I think many people, not everybody, but I think a number of people have been very nonchalant about the vaxes. I think they've just thought of them as like, hey, it's just another flu vax. What's the big deal? I have actually a number of close friends who are that way with it. It's just like, why are you making such a big ruckus about this? The FDA knows what they're doing. What, you think you're smarter than the FDA and who? I mean, of course, this guy, I even have a doctor friend. I think he's like 3 or 4 in. And I mean, just no issue with it at all, just completely going down. And this is the inawareness, you see, it becomes so aware. And it's like, this is where I get to controversial, but follow this. This is where I think nature is naturally culling out the people that are not ready for a larger awareness. And it's naturally happening because they're falling for the traps that nature has set up for people to fall into that simply aren't ready to transcend. They want a Christian world. My dad wants Jesus to come back. He doesn't want a saved world without Jesus. My dad does not want a great awakening that doesn't contain Christianity. He has no time for that. He's not ready to transcend then. And so there are behaviors and decisions that these people make that may have fatal consequences, and that may cause them to not, the end isn't for everybody. They may not be able to make it to the end. And I'm not being Mr. Doom and Gloom. I'm not saying any of that. I'm being very practical and saying this is what we are seeing. And the people who are the least aware are the ones who are getting the shots. And the ones who are getting the shots are the ones who are getting sick and dying. That's just practical matter of knowledge here we're looking at. There's no opinion there. It's like, this is the facts that are coming out from the numbers. And so you have to look at that objectively, and you have to realize, well, those people are being removed. They're being called out, and that's the tragedy. It's horrible for me to see. I've had a number of people around me die. It's horrible. And I know why they died. Everyone around me doesn't know why they died. I know why they died. And that's hard to be aware of that. And these other people aren't, because they're not willing to accept that larger awareness. They're not willing to accept, actually, that person did it to themselves, unfortunately, because they didn't know. No blame, no shame. But, you know, if you jump off the cliff, gravity's going to kill you. It doesn't matter if you're 80, if you're 8. Gravity has no feelings about it. You're going to die if you do that. And if you make some of these choices that society is offering you right now, this dominator culture society, if I had gotten chemo, Ashley, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. Yeah. I'd be dead. Anybody, I mean, the statistics say basically about 5 years and it's over. Typically, a person will get a more dreaded disease. I likely would have gotten that. You see, and so it's not safe. People think when you're in a plan, like God has this plan for you, so you're all safe. No, that's not the way it is. You're actually not safe. You have to use your mind. You can't pray away your problems. Right. You actually have to do something about them. Life isn't that passive. Nature's not just going to allow itself like that. You're going to have to go out and get it. In other words, you're going to have to participate fearlessly and risk. You're going to have to risk saying, I don't believe the WHO. You're going to have to risk saying, I don't believe the so-called president. Yeah. You're going to have to risk saying, I don't believe my doctor. I'm going to risk, and I risk saying, I don't believe my pastor. Sorry, I don't. And so this all requires risk, and a person who's unaware doesn't jump into that space. They're only going to jump into that space if they're ready for it. As Campbell used to say, the crisis comes to the person who's ready for it. And that's exactly what is happening right now. The people that are ready for this, they're going to transcend. You're going to see the end of it. No, the world is not going to collapse. You're going to see the end of this thing if you have a transcendent mind. But if you get caught up in any of the illusions, you're going to make a poor decision, and it very well may cost you your life, because nature is merciless. It's not going to look out for your little life. You're going to have to participate and stand for yourself, become self-aware and stand for yourself and make the right decisions, and so on and so forth. I'm preaching now, but anyways, that's
absolutely. No, I love that. And that's exactly what this experience has been. I think that before, as self-awareness is there, before you can really step into living, you have to, like, at some point overcome your fear of death, because that to me is at the center of everything. And I heard an interview of some Amber Lyon on a Joe Rogan episode years ago, where she explained her situation with ayahuasca, and through hearing her story alone, it helped me instantly overcome my fear of death. And that's such a pivotal thing to have. And I think that's part of the reason that I've been able to just go so fearlessly through this whole process, because it started with, you know, talking about Trump. It started with talking about the shots and all of this. And like every single barrier, I was met with so much resistance. And every time I would go through, it's like you lose people along the way. And
yes.
And it's even to the point, and I'm like, I can't catch a break. And maybe this is just the ascension, because it's like following this woman and then realizing she's a lying manipulator, and then telling everyone and losing more people. And then I'm a Christian, and then everyone's like, yeah, you're a Christian. And then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to disappoint them again. And I'm gonna have to lose more people. And I'm like, can I add, like, there's something about the evolution or expansion process where it's like, you're never in a place where you can really be comfortable. If you're constantly growing, it's like impossible. And in the back of my mind, it's like the way I move forward is because it feels more alive than anything, is to be genuine. That's all I know, is that, like, being authentic and just being like, oh, well, I changed again, guys. And then pissing everyone who wants to like stay the same, because a lot of people just want to find a space and stay in that space.
Yeah.
And I can never stay anywhere for very long, because once I get a view of the landscape, I'm like, that's wrong, that's wrong. And I start saying, and everyone's uncomfortable, like, get the hell out of here, stop saying that, we like it here. And I'm like, I'm a freaking nomad. But
and Cancer for me, Ashley, Cancer was the greatest teacher in that sense, on the exact same things that you were saying right now, and conquering the fear of death. I'm unusual. I am extremely thankful for Cancer. Okay. I know there's a lot of people that hate Cancer. That's no problem. No issue with that at all. And I completely understand it hasn't been as kind to others as it was to me, because I was able to survive. But it was my greatest teacher, because it taught me not to fear death. Because I can't tell you, every night that I went to bed for month after month after month, I literally did not know if I would be alive when I woke up the next morning, because I wasn't following the protocols and the doctors wouldn't help me. And so I literally night after night after night had no idea. And I've got my wife there, I've got my little kids, and I cannot tell you what that felt like to walk into that space. And you eventually, like my naturopathic doctor told me, you have to become completely comfortable in that space. You have to completely be loose in that space, because where there's inflammation, the infection is not healing. And if you're inflamed in your head and you're filled with anxiety, you are going against the healing principle. You, Chuck, you have to bear that in. You have to bring that into accord. You cannot be fighting and resistant. You have to be okay with, I don't know if I'm going to wake up in the morning, and I'm completely okay with that. This is not going to hold me down. And this is that idea of not holding to anything. Cancer really helped me do that. So it was so much easier to leave Christianity, because I had learned, if I hold things, I'm just going to build anxiety. If I'm gripping and holding to life, it's just going to fight me more. I have to learn
beautiful.
that, but not be passive. That's
not be passive, but that's why it's hard to explain, because you're interacting, but you're not, I guess, holding on to outcomes. And what you just said was so beautiful about I think that's a tool that's gotten me through so many things. Fear is like my biggest pet peeve, I guess. I'm not a fan of fear. And if I'm afraid of something, then I do it to the point where I'm like, oh, I have to do this thing, so that like, I don't have my whole life. That's a good
way to assuage it.
Yeah. I just like run into the thing that makes me afraid. But one of the things that I do when there's a fearful situation, like let's say like I was threatened in some way or whatever, I follow it through in my mind to the worst possible scenario. And then I find acceptance. And it's always the worst possible scenario is always death or suffering. Right. So it's like,
interesting, Ashley.
So I find a way. I'm like, okay, what if this happens? Oh, and then what if that happens? And I address all of the fears in my mind. And then I'm like, well, I guess I'll be okay. I'm going to do this anyway. And,
that's interesting, actually, because the exact way that I approach fear is the opposite.
Really?
That's interesting, actually. Yes. Because I go the opposite direction, and I go, what's causing me to be afraid? Why am I afraid? Not, since I'm afraid this will happen, and then realizing what will happen if I continue to be afraid to motivate me out of the fear. Okay, which is what you're describing, which is great. My approach is, wait a minute, why am I afraid in the first place? Why am I afraid of hell? Like, why am I afraid of the different things that the devil prowling about like a roaring lion? Why am I afraid of that? Why am I afraid of the devil prowling around? Why am I afraid? This is what I was asking when I was beginning to leave Christianity. Why am I afraid of that? And I began to realize, well, I'm the one who's inducing the fear, because I've gotten this idea in my mind that I'm being watched, that I'm being preyed upon, and I'm fomenting that. So I don't want to foment that. I want to completely accept that by recognizing why I'm fomenting. And then by recognizing why I'm fomenting, I identify with the fear, and then it's assuaged in that way. So I find it so intriguing to hear how you deal with that. That's really great to hear. It's interesting.
I love and I love the way that you do that too. It's just however we can. It's also neat how we all have our own little ways. But when you said surrender to the outcome, like that is ultimately, however you get to that point, it's so important, because, and it's not, like you said, not walking away, but it's so beautiful that you had to accept something, which it's amazing, because it feels so, we're supposed to be afraid, especially when your health is on the line. But when you surrender to it, then the cortisol levels drop. Then all of a sudden, like the body is like, going to start that healing process. So I just think it's very interesting. It's like the opposite of what we were told. One thing that when I learned about the placebo effect, I've always heard of it, but I never really looked into it. When I learned about the double blind placebo, like I think a couple years ago, I started reading about it. I was like, why isn't this the most studied thing and the most talked about thing in the medical industry? It's not just about the placebo. It's saying that we can heal ourselves just by belief. And obviously there's action involved in certain situations, but I was just like, man, that's
a special person to pull that off.
It's anti the medical industry though. No wonder they don't want to talk about it, but it is their standard for testing is double blind placebo. Not only does the person who's administering the whatever not know what it is, the person who gives it to them doesn't know, because if there's like any even if someone thinks, like if I'm the nurse and I don't know why this is so fascinating to me, but if I'm the nurse and I know I'm giving someone the placebo, I might somehow translate that through my eyes and it could affect the study. So that's why this is the standard, is that no one knows what it is. And so the person just believes based on pure belief. And I'm like, this is all, like, I just wish that our medical industry would
recognize
focus on that.
It takes,
it's okay. I explained that horribly.
No, it just takes control out of their hands, and it allows the individual to take more control of their own life. And that's the last thing a controller wants. The last thing a controller wants is for them to ever think that you're in prison. They want you to think that you're free while doing exactly what they say. And so it's real important to the awareness thing. It all comes back to awareness. It keeps coming back to awareness, and it keeps coming back to self-identity, and just realizing I'm not the monster they're making me out to be. I'm not the weakling they're making me out to be. I don't need all this help that they think that I need. And I have everything I need within me. And when you really begin to understand that, the questions are resolved because you realize all the answers are already there. It's just simply, I just simply need to discover them. Nothing's being hidden from me in the sense of how much I can discover, in the sense of how big my consciousness can expand. In other words, it always can expand more. And so it's simply a matter of fearlessly walking into these spaces that are difficult to walk into, namely calling these institutions that are established liars, and seeing within yourself. No, I mean, they do have some good information that's useful to me, but they are not the end all be all thing, if it makes sense.
Exactly. No, beautifully said. It all comes back to control. That's kind of the theme. So I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I'd like to read real quick these 4 questions I have for you from friends of mine, and then I am going to read my favorite quote from your book, and then I'll give you time. And then I'll give you time to talk about anything you'd like before we wrap. But no rush whatsoever. Just kind of giving a general layout. So someone said, I finished Chuck's book last week and feel like I have all the question answered except for this one. I want to know his thoughts on the spiritual realm. I think he's touched on some, but I'm kind of confused. I've always felt a connection to spirit or biofield, but have always pushed it away because of how I was raised. The people around me growing up always said meditation crystals and such were of the devil, but to me, it just feels natural. It's still so hard as an adult to get past this cognitive dissonance like Chuck refers to.
Yeah. Can you read the first part of what she said again? The first part.
I finished Chuck's book last week and feel like I have all the questions except for one. I want to know his thoughts on the spiritual realm.
That's right. Okay. So the spiritual thing, that was one of the things I addressed when I left Christianity was, if I'm not a sinner, what am I? And the way that I resolved the spiritual question was realizing that nature is simply God manifesting in a way that we can recognize, comprehend, and understand, because God is outside. God is an enigma. And what's amazing is, and this is where the relationship comes in, or the relation comes in, how much like, or how many characteristics like God we have. We're enigmas. I can't be described in a book. Nobody can be described in a book. We can't be ultimately defined. Our life is like, you never can really truly know someone. You can be around them, be friends with them, and all that kind of thing, but you can never truly delve every depth. Well, God's the same way in all of these different ways. And when you begin to understand yourself in that same context, you can then begin to identify with the enigma that you're in and realize that you're simply an apple that has fallen from this enigma called a tree. And so, or this enigma called nature. And so you have simply fallen from the outpouring of nature, the fruit of nature, and here you are. And you're here to discover what that is. We are here to discover what that is. We're not evolved creatures in the sense of the crazy ideas that science gives you. We're not created creatures in the sense of the crazy ideas that Christianity gives you. We're some kind of emergence that has similar characteristics and properties to this great energy that surrounds and permeates all of us. And we are simply an enigma within that. And so it's not going to be something you're ever going to define, and everyone's going to have a different experience of it because it's not the same for anybody because it's an enigma. And so the best thing to do, I found, is to take little snippets of a lot of other people, other opinions and all that stuff that align with you. So some of my book is going to be awesome. It's going to totally resonate with someone. And then some of it's going to be just like, I just don't see it that way, Chuck. That's the beauty of life. That is what is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And it's good not to be in a group mind when it comes to spirituality. That's why my book, there's no workbook, there's no assignments, there's no laws, because it's simply, hey, this is an open field for you to walk into. Take a gander, check it out. Do you like it? If you like it, awesome. I'm going to have some awesome views for you that are going to help you out. If you don't like it and it's just like, dude, I don't get it. Where are you coming from? Get out immediately, like leave immediately. I'm only going to cause you anxiety and issues. You need to find another thing that you resonate with. And so with people who ask that spiritual question, what does Chuck do with spirituality? It's like that. I find my identity through the enigma. I find my identity, like everything I'm seeing is God. Everything I'm seeing is this rapture, okay? And I want to be a part of that. So I'm going to participate with that, but I don't know really what it is. I don't know really what it's doing, but it sure is a lot of fun if I don't hang on to it. And it sure is radical. If I try some interesting ideas, it's like I've got a chemistry set in front of me. Like, this is crazy how incredibly reactive the world is to us and what we throw out into the world. Like my book, I've thrown that out into the world. And it's just like, I'm seeing explosions happening. This is awesome. Like, people are totally seeing things differently. This is great. It's like a big firework. And that's really how to see, to me, that's how to see life. It's just a big firework.
That is so beautiful when you said like having a chemistry set, because like I think that's what it is there's, once we get over this idea of there's a right thing and a wrong thing, once we like remove those limitations, it's kind of like it's whatever you want it to be. And then it's like, oh, then all of a sudden you're like asking yourself questions like, well, what do I want it to be? And it's like exciting. And it's like you pick up the things along the way and put them in your bag that you want, your souvenirs, your things. Like, I don't know, I love that. That's beautiful. Let's see here. So what's up with loosh? Couple people have had questions. I think there was another one about it. On the loosh topic, it's kind of confusing how it works. And Chuck has such an incredible way of explaining things. I need to re-listen to his last video because I don't quite grasp it. Is all this energy harvesting on a spiritual level as in angels and demons? Because I know in the Luciferian one, you talked about it more and you were talking about these like fourth dimensional.
Yeah, that really goes into the alien question. I think in many ways we were infiltrated and the world was basically turned into a farm. And I think that loosh is simply one of the commodities that comes out of the farm. And it's a commodity that's in the spiritual, etheric realm that these beings, these creatures, whatever they are, whether they're aliens, whether they're actual aliens and demons, I don't know. I don't know if anybody could know that. But the effect is still there. What is happening is still physically happening. And I do absolutely believe that when a person passes away, a spirit comes out of the body. I think that is what is animating the body. They say, I think the body weighs 30 grams less the moment after death. And I think that 30 grams is that essence that is coming out of you. And that's the life, that's the spark, that's the consciousness. And the question is, and I mean, there are morbid stories about this, and I won't get into them, but the question is, can that be captured? As far as loosh is concerned, I think that is just simply the consumption of that essence. Now, I don't believe that essence can be destroyed. I don't believe that there's, it can be burned up or anything like that, that aspect of consciousness. But I think it can be manipulated in the same way that we are materialistically and mentally manipulated. These patterns are consistent. Nature doesn't have like a certain way it acts in this pattern, and then another way. These things all are interlaced and interact. And so I think that yeah, I think that loosh thing is real, and I think that this whole Satan worship thing and this whole idea of using people in that way and really consuming them, I think is going to be one of the real tragedies that's going to come out of this awakening, is that people are going to realize that that's been a very real thing, and it's been really horrific and horrible. And thank goodness it's all coming to a stop. Thank goodness that they are arresting that stuff and getting it put under control, and so that it won't keep happening. But I wanted to make mention of the Eden story that I mentioned in the Luciferian video. In my opinion, the entire Eden story is a metaphor. It's a metaphor of the infiltration of humanity. It's a metaphor. I don't particularly believe that like Satan is having sex with Eve, that Adam is having sex with Eve. Like that's how all, I think these are all metaphors, and they're showing a larger picture, and they're simply describing it in a materialistic way that you and I can understand. But it's pointing to a larger perspective, which is the birthing of consciousness in the universe. And so there's good and evil in this consciousness. And so good and evil is part and parcel to this emergence, which is the human being. The garden, that was simply a metaphor to help people understand that human beings were tainted by whatever technology, by whatever was going down then as far as consciousness is concerned, our DNA. These things were affected. That's why it goes back to sex, because it's a DNA effectuated issue, and that our DNA in one sense or another was altered. They say that you only use like 5 or 10% of your brain or something. That's been genetically shut off. Now, if I'm a nature creature, which I am, I know that when human beings first emerged, there's no way nature wasted all this brain power and just made all that brain there, or caused that brain to form, or whatever happened, and not use it. Nature is the most efficient force in the universe. Okay, so that's not going to happen. So to me, this story is describing that there was an infiltration, that the human DNA was altered, that there was an activity that went down that changed the development of human beings, that changed the development of society and turned it into a farm, turned it into a greed-based society, turned it into a society of low consciousness, of people that don't see past the veil, but just see the veil. And it was a concerted effort to put that on people. And that's kind of the alien side of it I see coming out, where there's an external manipulation that's coming in. And because they say with the karma thing and that Luciferians, they have to tell you what they're going to do, or they receive the karma. I think that's what that story is attempting to do, to tell you what actually happened, but in such a way that it's so distorted, you never know actually what happened. You believe in this whole idea of this garden, this Eden, these people, that demons are coming in, having sex and all this kind of thing. And I really think that this is more of a metaphor of showing you spiritually what's happening to the consciousness of human beings, showing that they are not going to have the capacity that they once had. I mean, even the Bible says that Noah lived like 9 years or something. Even our age was shortened. And so I think that's all part of the consciousness. That's part of shutting down the brain. It's part of weakening the individual so that they're a controllable animal, so that they can be contained, and their mind is not going to allow them to free themselves. They're going to stay locked in these ridiculous menticidal ideas of themselves that are programmed into them. And I think the Eden story is basically showing this is the beginning of that infiltration. This is the beginning of that mind fuck that basically happened at that time. And so I think the whole Eden story has been completely tainted. I think it's really been, as far as its interpretation is concerned, I think it's extremely tainted. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. The one thing I didn't know is that, so these Luciferians, that is basically all of them, right? All of the families and structural like organizations. It's like a combination of all of it, right?
Yeah, they're controlled by a larger agency. They're the ones that we can see. The Luciferians, the people like the politicians, the kings and queens, the governors, the people that are completely taken in the religion. Okay, we can see them. So they carry out the laws, they carry out the nastiness and all that, but then there's an empire behind them that motivates them. And that's where I feel like we're in, kind of some alien territory, where we're into kind of some massive controlling fields that are controlling these groups that control us. So it's multi-layer in that sense. So to me, the politicians, the people that we see, they're puppets. They're puppets. George Soros, puppet. Clinton's are puppets. Obama's a puppet. These are all puppets that are being used by this larger organization so that you actually have the mechanics to get the deeds done, because you got to have a person in the position. who signs the actual paper, who actually gets on the camera and presents the case. You have to have the down and dirty people that are in it. In that sense, they're the Luciferians. And then you have the higher, beyond that, the true farmers, the alien culture, the anti-human agenda, the whole thing that's completely anti-development, anti-emergence. Yeah, that's powering those individuals.
Whew. It's an incredible amount of thought out over centuries and centuries and centuries in order to keep people controlled. And it also, what the other message I get from it is how powerful we truly are, that they would have to go to such great lengths.
Yes. Bam. That's it, Ashley. Bam. That's why they have to go to such great lengths, because they have to match the potential of the person. Because you can't, the only way you're going to be able to hold that potential down in a human being is if you match them with the fear potential that equals.
And it's all in the mind. That's yep. And they have to go through the avenue of the mind, because I mean, they can kill us, obviously, and they have in history, but like they need us. They need us probably for the energy that you're talking about, or
the loosh.
The loosh. Well, and also the work, the slave labor, exactly. Everything. Yeah. Like
Yes, to actually have the planet functioning, to actually have a society, to actually have skyscrapers and buildings and produce. I mean, you got to have a working society to do that. So if you want these animals that you're farming to be happy enough to survive and keep going and develop, you got to let them do a little bit of that, but it's always contained and controlled. I mean, look at what they did with Tesla's work. I mean, when he died, they confiscated all of his, and we wouldn't be in this world that we're in right now if they would have released his work. There's a concerted effort to keep us down. There's a concerted hard effort to contain the consciousness of people, because it's not easy to contain the consciousness of a human being. Yeah, it takes work.
It's incredible. Okay, one more question from a friend. Let's see here. This is from a friend's husband. She said, he said, I just listened to your book, Elucidating Christianity. The book conjures many questions, but this is the one I've chosen to toss your way. Have you come to a conclusion concerning the reality of God and Jesus actually being the Son in the physical realm? And they have just obfuscated the truth of it from the Council of Nicaea, etc.? Or do you think this entire story and concept is a lie? And if so, what have you concluded is the actual truth in that regard?
Yeah, I think that I don't think sin exists. I think sin is a lie. If you remove sin from the Christian institution, you no longer have Christianity. Okay, that's the key thing. You remove sin, there's no need for absolvement. There's no need for a Christ Savior to come save you. There's no need for heaven and hell, because there's no purgatory. There's no end, because there's no such thing as sin. So the key thing to understanding the book is realizing that sin doesn't exist. And when you realize that sin doesn't exist, you then understand the psychology of sin. And when you continue to try and understand the world through conflict, you're not only not going to understand yourself, but you're not going to understand the world, because there is no conflict. The conflict is made in your head when you think you're a sinner. The conflict is invented when you think you have to be in this group and can't be in that group. You then are the one who's promulgating the conflict. The Bible is simply fomenting the conflict by being misinterpreted. And like I said, if you simply place the Christ consciousness, the awareness, the unfoldment that is within you, you simply replace that with every time it says Jesus, you're going to find a lot more of the verses really resonate, because you realize it's within me. And so to understand my book, if you try to understand it through the contexts that it breaks down, now you're going to falter. Because if you're trying to understand my book through the idea of sin and atonement, you haven't gotten the point of the book, which is that idea is a bad idea. And if you integrate that idea into your life, this is the fallout, the psychological fallout that you will experience with that bad idea. So if you try to understand my book from the Christian context, meaning sin still exists, atonement is still needed, my book is just going to go over your head, because you won't realize it's pointing to the psychology that happens when you think you're a sinner. So if you want to understand what the book is really saying, you have to begin the process, and this is the painful part. You have to begin the process of, I don't know if I believe in sin anymore. I don't know if I therefore need a savior anymore. Well, if I don't need a savior, then what was the role of Jesus? Well, it just explodes into bigger and bigger problems with that little tiny decision to say, does sin exist? You know, the fallout is huge because the whole thing in Christianity is built on that identity crisis, which comes from you're a sinner. Everything builds from there. If you throw that out at the start, Christianity has nothing to build on because there is no separation. The separation comes from being born a sinner. Well, the whole reason for all of these things you have to do in the Bible is because it's operating on the synopsis that you are a sinner. It's operating under the assumption that you are fallen, that you're separate, and here's the litany of things that you have to do in order to qualify yourself for God. So hopefully that helps answer that question. You just got to get further out. To understand it, he's going to have to get further away from these baselines that I had integrated myself. I'm a sinner. The world is fallen. It has to be fixed. Those things don't change. That's it. That doesn't change. And there's a heaven and a hell, and that doesn't change. Well, again, you're fighting to stay in the cage. You're the prisoner and the warden. You're creating the world that you have to live in. And so you warden that world by keeping the world that small, and then you're the prisoner because you're at that small mind. You can't see out of that world. And that's a lot of times where those questions come from, as a person who's trying to see outside the world that they're forcing themselves to be in. It's a philosophical question. You got to go deeper with it to understand. But the point is, if he can loose from the idea of being a sinner, he's well on his way. It'll all begin to make sense when you no longer have to have that atonement. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. I think, like you said, there's that one thing you pull that thread and the whole thing just falls apart. And for me, it was the idea of you're a sinner. Like, that's what, that was huge. And when I started to say to myself, you're not broken, I was like, well, you don't need a savior. I believe that in every aspect of life, except for in this one thing. It's like, no, it's a really beautiful process. So I want to ask one real quick question that I wanted to ask in the beginning and I forgot, as we're winding down. When you went through this crazy life transition, what was it like in your marriage? Because I assume that you guys met through the church lens or in the church lens. Yeah. Because it sounds like you and Jenny, right, have an incredible relationship. So what was it like for her?
That's such a great question, Ashley, because I hear from people who it's one side. And I've heard people that have gotten divorced over it because their partner's just like, I'm not going to be unequally yoked with you. If you're going to walk away from Christianity, there's nothing there. Okay. I'm very fortunate in that Jenny is an outlaw. In other words, she doesn't follow the rules. Jenny has her own ideas. She is not a follower. Jenny, she's going to set the course. And so thankfully, when it kind of all began to come out when I had cancer. Jenny, at that time, when I had cancer, I was still working at the church. We were still hardcore Christians. Jenny was still Christian. And I remember one afternoon, I brought home the book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule. I think it's by Richard Strauss or something like that, Strassman, something like that. And it basically talks about the psychoactive ingredient that is inside ayahuasca, which is DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And it's a book that begins to show you that there's a larger reality than the reality that you're in. And this initially brought Jenny a bit of anxiety. Because she saw DMT as like, okay, it's this illicit drug, and you're bringing drug books home now, and you're thinking these drug ideas, and that kind of gave her some anxiety. But it really worked out because as time went on, and as I explained to her how, I thought it was breaking down and how Christianity was breaking down in me, she really was able to hear that because of this outlaw side of her, this side of her that's not willing to follow the rules. So when I came along breaking the rules, saying, I don't think there's sin, Jenny. I don't think this atonement thing. I mean, I don't know. And she was willing to feel that. She didn't see or hear that and get afraid, like, oh my God. Like she was, after a little bit of an initiation, after I'd say about 6 months to a year, she really became more receptive to it. And I didn't demand it on her. I wasn't like, we're leaving Christianity, we're getting the heck out of here. I mean, I left it with my kids what they wanted to. I left it with my wife what they wanted to. I have no problem being with kids or a wife that are Christian or that claim Christianity. That's fine. I don't have an issue. I really believe in live and let live. So it didn't cause me an anxiety or issue that she was resistant to it initially. And then it just worked out. And eventually she really began to see my points. And when I finished the book, I mean, it really helped her understand that I really believe there is a deeper force, a deeper principle, a higher reality, an ultimate reality that is part and parcel of all of this. So I'm not trying to run or get away from that. And so it really worked out with me and Jen because she really has a stronger spiritual side than I do. She's much more, she's into a little bit more of the astrology stuff than I am. I understand the tarot card stuff. I've done a little bit of that. We could do a whole interview on my life cards for tarot. And then we have some interactions a little bit more on the ethereal side, which is where Jenny really comes from. I'm more practical, hands-on, give me the science and psychology for this and I'll tear it apart. Whereas she's more feeling oriented, kind of, what does this resonate with me? And if it doesn't, I'm really not into it, kind of a thing. She's not as concerned about like the facts or the thing. I'm not saying that she believes in non-factual stuff. It's just like, she's completely fine with stuff that's outside things that you can't put into a factual box. And I'm a little bit more on the other side of that. So we do well together with this. Yeah. We work well together with this. And where she's, where it goes too far for me, I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. And where I go too far for her and I take it too much to an extreme, she's fine with it. She's like, okay, you're going to do your thing. That's fine. We don't try to make the other person believe what the other believes. I think that that's too confining. We need to be separate in that sense. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. No, that's exciting. I feel like, yeah. I'm similar with my boyfriend. We've been together. We just celebrated 8 years and, we were very much on, thank you. We were like on the same kind of space and then like politically ish or whatever. And then I started to wake up before him. I was working in the stores. So I was every single day working in the chain stores as a wine rep. So I saw every first tape that went on the ground, you know what I mean? Just like, oh, you froze up. I lost it.
You're breaking up.
But I was watching it. So I felt it. I saw it. I was in it. And it took him, I'd say about 3 or 4 months after me to kind of like see the gravity of what was going on in the world. But once he did, I was just so grateful. Cause like you said, I've seen couples split over 2020 and feeling very differently about things. So I'm very lucky to have that situation as well, where we can grow together.
Yeah. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. Spirituality and politics typically don't mix. So yeah, that's great, you guys.
We both changed completely at the same time, but like simultaneously. It was like so beautiful. But so I'm going to read my favorite quote. One of my favorite quotes. I feel like I tell everyone, like every line in your book is a standalone quote. I think that the way you wrote it was with so much thoughtfulness and precision. And I know that you talked about your editor a lot and their help in it. You can just tell that the combination of what you guys did, it really created something beautiful. And I hope everyone listens to the book. I've listened twice. And I love that you have clips individual that you can just share. I've shared just little pieces. It makes it so easy. Yeah. But it was really well done. I'm going to read this and then I'm going to ask if there's anything that you'd like to recommend as far as other authors. So I know that you had this whole wealth of like growing in your experience and you always refer to different people who helped you along the way. So I think I know the audience would like to hear that, but this is one of my favorite things you said. It is much easier to contain and control a mass of people through pricking their fears and desires and keeping them needy than it is to encourage them to think for themselves and risk their independent development. Spontaneous independent development is an unknown quantum and is unlimited, and it therefore cannot be contained or controlled once it is fostered. Leadership in a dominator culture cannot have their members self-developing and free thinking for themselves because eventually they will figure out they are being controlled. They will figure this out because nature self-organizes. Expanding awareness is a feature of nature, and the ever-expanding awareness of us as nature creatures will eventually see through whatever game's being foisted as a natural outpouring of consciousness, discernment, experience, and sensitivity. Muddy water will clarify if left to settle. I just think that's incredibly beautiful.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Wow, that is fantastic. Thank you for reading that. That is fantastic. I'm so glad to hear you like that. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
The nature self-organizing has just been, I keep saying it now. I'm like, oh, it's just nature. This is what happens. Exactly. Like there's less anxiety about everything. Yes. And I'm just like, this is just what we do. But if you don't mind, who would you recommend for people? I know Joseph Campbell's a big one. Is there any specific books?
His book on goddesses is fantastic. He wrote a book on the goddess, which just is beautiful. It really will help you understand dominator culture better. Elaine, speaking of which, Elaine Reisler's book on dominator culture, it's called the Sword and the Blade, I believe it's called. The Sword and the Blade. That will open up dominator culture for you so well. If that intrigues you, that book, that's how I learned about dominator culture, was from Elaine. And then Alan Watts wrote a book called The Way of Zen. That's life-changing. He wrote a book called the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. Life-changing. If you're searching for identity, if you're trying to understand who you are better, if you're trying to understand the world better, those two books, along with the goddesses, will help you tremendously. Not help in the sense of show you, but help in the sense of open your mind, open your eyes, open up so that you can emerge and come forth. There's a book by John Lamb Lash called Not in His Image. This also deals with the partnership societies and dominator culture. And then he also gives a wonderful elucidation of the beginning of dominator culture. The beginning of his book he talks about the death of, it was the gal that worked under the gentleman that had been in calculus. Her name starts with an A. I can't remember her name, but anyway, he talked about the death of her and how she was killed by religious zealots. And she was the last true sort of a person who could advance science as well as the spiritual realm. She could combine these two things. And the Hypatia, that's her name. The Murder of Hypatia is how he opens the book. So anyways, those books will help with that. And then of course the DMT spirit module, the spirit molecule, is also just a great work in our beginning to understand these really effective natural drugs that help people break out of their asylum, their mental asylum. If there's anything that one of the greatest things a person can do, I can't say I recommend it, but one of the greatest things I ever did personally was I took mushrooms, and it really helps break down these thought patterns you get set in, because it's like a path through a forest. Yeah. If you walk that path over and over and over again, eventually you can see it easily. And your neurons are the same way with their pathways. When you have a thought process, it's hitting the same firing neurons. It's going down that path and they get used to firing. And so that's why it's so hard neurologically to break a person out of an addiction, to break them out of a thought pattern, because those neurons have been always firing in the same path through the forest. Well, those drugs, namely ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, DMT, these things break up those paths. So a person, when they're in the state, they're like, wait a minute, I can actually contemplate the idea that Jesus doesn't exist, or that I'm not a sinner. I can actually contemplate that without any anxiety. And those drugs help you do that because they break down that thought pattern that's always been inside of you. So when you come out of that induced state, you're renewed because your brain is now more open to free thought. It's more open to the idea of, you know what, I want a bigger context than a God that can't look upon evil. I actually want to have a God big enough that can look upon evil. I actually want an idea of principle of spirituality that extends past the idea of in-groups and out-groups. And so when you come out of those states from taking those drugs, it's beautiful. It's one of the greatest things about cannabis. It helps you question authority. It helps you question people who are insisting that you obey them. And it helps you use your discernment so that you can contemplate and patiently, because it puts you in that state, patiently think through your problems, patiently and methodically think through the issues that you're having. And that's why the controllers don't want you taking cannabis, because they know you're going to wake up if you keep taking it, because you won't obey anymore. You see how it works? It has nothing to do with your health. It has nothing to do with your remaining healthy or addiction. It's not addicting. These are all illusions put into people to keep them away from the answers, to keep them away from the solutions that will help them break out of the veil that they're underneath. So yeah, I'd recommend those books for breaking out of the veil for sure, for sure.
No, that's exciting. And I back up everything you say about psychedelics. In 2019, I felt drawn to, I was isolated. My boyfriend was away for 8 months. And it was a really crazy time to go through dealing with loneliness and isolation in the middle of nowhere. And I decided, like I said, to go deeper into it. And I did mushrooms alone, a whole bunch. And it was one of the most, I feel that it was it was in preparation for 2020. It was like getting me completely
totally.
ready. And now I don't even have any desire, but it's like I needed to. And the last few times I've taken them, it's almost like, why are you here? There's nothing here for you. Like, go live. And I know that, but there was a time where, oh my God, I remember there was something in my relationship where I was treating him in a way just subtly that was hurting him. And I laid on the couch once and he's on the other couch. And for 8 hours, I was shown how I was hurting him and how he felt with like I'm in tears as I'm seeing it, but there's so much love pouring in as it's happening, where I'm understanding, and it changed the entire dynamic of our relationship from that point on. I had the following morning, I just started bawling and apologizing and telling him how I understand it. He couldn't believe how much it restored us.
Yeah. Cannabis saved my marriage. Seriously, wow. Magic mushrooms saved my marriage. I mean, seriously, I'm not saying that as a light thing. I'm dead serious. They do have profound effect on your mind. And since you live with your mind every day, when you can do things to it that are profound, because man, you're gonna expand that consciousness, and that makes you so much more empathetic to those around you, because you lose yourself. It's not that you kill your ego, it's not that, but that you bring out this empathy inside of you, so that you're not as self-concerned, but you're more concerned about these other things that you feel your heart drawing you to.
Yep.
And that's what's so beautiful about those drugs, is that they really help you become a more empathetic person, a more realized person, a person who is more accepting of the world as it is. So when pandemics and stuff, or fake pandemics, are brought in front of you, you're not reacting and going crazy. You're just working through it, and you're methodically thinking it through. And like, what are the real facts here that I need to know, so that I don't panic, so I don't freak out. And man, those drugs really help a person balance out in that sense. And you're exactly right. You know when it's time is over for them. Like McKenna used to say, he even said, he reached a point where you realize there's nothing more that there's going to teach me here anymore. I mean, I've really expanded my mind. I've opened up these channels that have been blocked, and I've really been served. And maybe the use will be something like once every 10 years or so. Yeah. Or a person might need it as a microdose. The point being, there's no attachment there. And when you feel your spirit saying you've had enough, walk away. Because there's no addiction potential with mushrooms or cannabis. These things you can walk away from without any physiological effects. It doesn't happen at all. And really, that's what they're for. They're for being used when you need them, as you need them. If you need them as a daily tonic, great. If you do better doing them once a year, great. If you do better doing them once in your life, that might be enough for you. And that's totally fine. It goes back to Lucius when they used to do the awakening ceremonies in ancient Greece. Mm-hmm. When they would take the kekion, the ayahuasca-like substance, they would drink it amidst the community. And this was communal. It tied these people together, made them empathetic, made them want to have a partnership culture, this kind of thing. This was a therapy, a diet that was happening in society that really helped society remain humane. Yeah. And that's exactly why they took them away, because they don't want people humane. They don't want people acting in humane ways. And by taking away these substances, you've taken away one of the real assets to humane development. It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Absolutely. No, because we all start to understand.
I think I've lost you. Did it end on that?
Let me know if you can hear me.
There you are. There you are. There you are. Yay.
Yeah. No, that was really beautiful. And you're right. I just, and that's the one thing I experience is more than anything is everything's connected. And I think that's, like, separateness is an illusion. That's pretty much at the heart of everything. I think that you're talking about separateness from ourselves and from one another is an illusion, and that we are definitely trying to be controlled. But like we said earlier, the lengths that they have to go through just speaks more to our power than anything. And I see incredible freedom. I see incredible beauty, freedom of the mind. The creative exploration of life for fun is something that I see it needs to be coming back into play, where even with all this stuff going on in the world, it's so horrible and crazy, know that this is just one of many times like this, and we can have the audacity to have joy in the midst, and yes, to fight for what's right. I don't even like the word fight, because it's not even a resistance, but just but to put our energy in places where we believe we can change it for the better, and in the midst, enjoy it. Don't like this idea that, oh, we're in a spiritual war, we're in a war, we're always in a war, and I'm like, are we in a war? Because I don't think it is. And if you can, one thing your book has helped me do, and all of your videos, is to help me stop saying things like we're in a war, stop looking at the world through a state of conflict. And I appreciate it very much. Like, I would just, anything that you'd like to share in our final notes, I appreciate you so much coming on. What would you like to say and leave everyone with?
Ashley, it's been an honor and privilege to be here today. Really, I have just so enjoyed this. I've wanted to have a conversation like this with someone about my book and about these subject matters for a long time now. I've actually said to Jenny repeatedly, man, I wish I could just drum up some kind of interview with someone. I think I could really, we could really do some great things. And so this has been an incredible opportunity to share these things. I think they're very important. And I think everything that we've talked about today is relevant. It's relevant to today. It's relevant to society. It's relevant to what people are facing right now. And I mean, I can't add to that. It's been fantastic. I've so enjoyed and loved this. This has been great. I totally want to do it again down the road.
Me too, absolutely. Sure. I was going to say we could talk for like 20 hours. So like, we'll definitely check back in the future. And everybody go read Chuck's book. Thank you so much for sharing yourself so openly with the world and the way you do it courageously. It's a better place because you're in it. So
thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.